Somebody link this, and this is truly spectacular. Was this from today? No, this is from 2 days ago. This is real? Combating Combating Social Justice Rhetoric, a cheat sheet for policymakers by Bruce DeGilly. I don't know this person. And then we got James Lindsay. I love James Lindsay, man. Content producer extraordinaire. I've said it before, but the easiest way you can explain James Lindsay is basically he's a refugee from an alternate dimension where the Earth was conquered by an alien species called the Woke. No relation to our term. And when he emerged dazed and bleary-eyed to our reality, he saw the term used in our lexicon, and he thought, oh my god, they're already here. And since then, he has warred against the concept of wokeness, whatever that means, with the same fervent militarism that a madman, would rave against an invasion of the body snatchers. Seriously, if you watch his Twitter, it truly is, it's something else. But anyway, responding to social justice rhetoric, Doctors Bruce Gilley, Peter Bokosian, and James Lindsay. Okay, so this was made by doctors, okay? So we're actually, I love to do this, folks. We're actually going to be exceedingly specific with our criticisms here, okay? We have some doctors making this. James Lindsay is sometimes described by very silly people as being an expert in critical race theory. I've never seen him define it correctly on social media. By expert, I mean he makes YouTube videos on it or whatever. And, you know, this is a little up my field, sociology, so, let's see. Let's see how it is, huh? Responding to social justice rhetoric, all right? So we're taking down the woke, I guess, okay? When they say, and then they have all these terms, okay? Environmental justice, cultural competence, decolonization, systemic racism, critical race theory, equity, social justice, diversity, white privilege / supremacy, BIPOC folks, racial justice, and inclusion. Okay, so if this is made by professionals, I'm going to treat it as something made by professionals, and I'm going to scrutinize it in ways that I do not typically. Let's go around, okay? Shall we? Maybe we'll open this in a new tab so we can scroll in properly. Okay. Let's start. Let's do it. Let's do it clockwise from decolonization. Okay. What they mean is removing European influence. So this is not true. First of all, one of the loudest voices for decolonization is from Palestinian activists. With Israeli encroachment into their territory. So this isn't a specifically European thing. Decolonization doesn't specifically refer to European influence. And what's more, it also doesn't refer to just any kind of influence. When people talk about decolonization, they don't mean like, don't have hot dog stands in Mexico. They mean, well, colonial influence, but I feel like that's kind of implied by the term. Okay. Which is an attempt to delegitimize the U.S. as a colonial project. Well, the U.S. sort of is a colonial project in the sense that it has engaged in colonialism. It has been the explicit goal of many U.S. leaders to engage in colonialism. It's not like a secret, you know? Pretty much the entirety of the Cold War was us using colonial projects to fight against other colonial projects being done by the USSR, or sometimes preemptively to do it. So this isn't like a woke secret. That's accepted fact. Replace the universal equality of the European tradition with illiberal non-European, quote, traditions. So this is, in addition to being incorrect, this is also racist. First of all, universal equality of the European tradition is a very interesting and very loaded set of terms that would never be used in academia, because European tradition is not a term used in academia, because Europe is a continent. Seriously? The Mediterraneans, Greece, the Baltic regions, the Slavic countries, the Norway, Finland, Europe, Spain, you think all the, oh yes, the European tradition. This is a term often used by white supremacists to try to unify a white identity in opposition to non-white identities, which, to be fair, they do right here. illiberal, non-European, quote, traditions. Putting traditions in quotes is very interesting here. I don't know what they're trying to imply, but this is pretty clearly an attempt to frame like the broader European hegemony as like the liberal equal project and the non-European, well, I mean everything else, I suppose, as well not. Which is funny and not true. So that's incorrect. We have systemic racism over here. That seems like a simple enough term. What they mean is differences are always due to systems. Man, they really had to stretch to misinterpret that, didn't they? No. Systemic racism means systemic racism. Now, statistically significant differences between broad populations are almost always due to systems. Yeah, of course. Wealth, geology, access to education. There are a ton of culture. There are a ton of factors that can influence, like differences. The differences they're referring to here, by the way, are differences in the crime statistics and differences in IQ. When people talk about systemic racism and naysayers come in, not geology, sorry, geography, I apologize. When naysayers come in to talk about how not every difference is down due to systems, what they're saying is these differences are due to inherent genetic components. So this is a bit of an odd one right here. Which is an attribution of group differences to vague systems imposed by others. Nothing vague about it, not even slightly. The criticisms of, say, institutional racism are incredibly pointed, extremely straightforward, and very well substantiated. An attempt to, quote, dismantle freedoms and to forcibly redistribute public and private goods. It's funny that they would say that other things are vague when their follow-up line is, saying things are racist is an attempt to destroy freedom and redistribute wealth. This is a extraordinary stretch. This is an unbelievable, phenomenal extrapolation from the available information that we have. What do we mean dismantle freedom? This is too vague to even say anything about. This is borderline conspiratorial. Critical race theory means race-centered thinking. From the legendary James Lindsay, known understander of critical race theory. It means race-centered thinking. What's funny is the term race-centered thinking could describe literally any kind of racial project, from the Holocaust to Martin Luther King's civil rights movement. So this is very, very vague. Which is the view that racism is baked into the system and inescapable. That one is true. Again, it is extremely evident, the criticisms of the criminal justice system with regards to racism, what have you. Plenty of other systems, too. That's just the big one. The view that racism is present even if no one is racist. Yes, I can explain this one very, 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 very simply. Okay? Let's say, for example, that you have a country where black people used to be slaves, but white people weren't. Or maybe there were some indentured servants, but for the most part, white people were free and blacks were slaves. Okay? So, let's say slavery is ended, and somehow, let's say this is through magic. In spite of hundreds and hundreds of years of prejudice, you snap your fingers, and people are no longer interpersonally racist. At all. You completely destroy it. We are all now completely egalitarian in our mind and in our thoughts. So how could there be racism anymore? We've gotten rid of slavery, and nobody is racist anymore. Well, and here's the key thing. The problem is, the white families in this country have had hundreds of years to build up generational wealth. The black families hadn't. Slaves tend not to save that much money, just how it works. So even if you cut out all the interpersonal racism, in a capitalist economy where access to wealth determines a lot of quality of life standards, black people are going to be worse off in almost every imaginable metric, even though there's no racism because of the racist history of the country. The past influences the present. This is what we know as causality. It's one of those things we just accept exists in our universe. The view that all disparities in group outcomes are due to racist systems. That's not necessarily true. You'd have to look at it at a system-by-system level. Social justice. What they mean is group entitlements. So this is obviously quite silly. If the term had been used ubiquitously back then, they would have referred to abolitionists as social justice warriors. They would have, we'll do equity next. They would have referred to women's suffragettes as equal social justice warriors. They would have referred to, yeah, they did basically. They didn't use the term social justice warrior, but they basically would have. So if by group entitlements what you mean is entitled to the same rights and freedoms as the majority group, then yes, social justice is an indication that everyone is entitled to the exact same standards of treatment, regardless of their race, sexuality, whatever. Which is, and I'm going to move my thing here, a denial of social and cultural differences. That is a strange retort to make. Group entitlements are a denial of social and cultural differences. This feels a little bit dog whistly to me. If you believe that everybody is entitled to the same fundamental rights and freedoms, which I think is a pretty fair thing to believe, this is like, but have you considered that different peoples are different? Well, sure, but not in ways that change the fact that they still deserve those same fundamental rights and freedoms. Anyway. A denial of just rewards to individuals who follow the law and act fairly. So this is another, this is a dog whistle and a straw man packed in together. Nothing in the social justice tab says anything about the criminal justice system, but this bullet point right here is presupposing that social justice means that you're denying rewards to people who follow the law, which implies that social justice is about, like, helping criminal? I don't even know what this is about necessarily. I don't even know what this is meant to be a response to. The reframing of particular political demands as universal moral imperatives. That one's funny. So this, not only is this incorrect, this is actually hypocritical. So right here, he's impugning, or they're impugning, social justice as a reframing of particular political demands as universal moral imperatives. Then why did we just read an earlier point where it was bad to replace the universal equality of the European tradition, i.e., a universal political demand being framed as a moral imperative? Up here, you're perfectly okay with universal moral demands describing political beliefs when it's European. But down here, you seem principally against the act when we're talking about people who don't follow the law and act fairly. Curious. Anyway, we have equity. Equity means equality of outcomes, apparently. No, just means equality of opportunity, which is a violation of equality before the law. I do not know how far you have to stretch to arrive at that conclusion. I do not even know what that means. A dismantling of the foundations of a free society. What? Equity means authoritarianism, tyranny, burning orphanages. What? Again, I don't even know what's being signaled here. State management of society, including reparations. What? Again, so what they're confusing here is they're saying equity means social programs to bring about equity, which means X. They skipped a step here. The problem is they already believe in social programs to bring about equity. Again, universal equality of the European tradition. The European tradition, I'm going to assume we refer to the Enlightenment here. Do you know what Enlightenment thinkers advocated for? Free public education. Because free public education was a state expenditure that maximized the potential for the average citizen to be informed enough to participate in a democracy. It turns out it also has a bunch of other social benefits, like industrialization and the modern technological economy and massive economies and et cetera, et cetera. So it just tends to be a generally good thing. So the European tradition of equality that they're so inarticulately referring to here would include some of these straw men that they're referring to equity as being. Diversity. What they mean is identity-based approach to society. Wouldn't a rejection of diversity also be an identity-based approach to society? That's kind of a you're having it both ways type dealio, isn't it? If you're opposing diversity, you're also taking an identity-based approach to society, you know? It was like all those people during Gamergate, where they were like, we don't have a problem with black and women characters. We just don't like them being forced in on an SJW agenda. But then, like, no, they actually did just mind having, like, black and women characters. Like, no matter how they were put in, unless the women were all like scantily clad sex sidekicks or something. They actually did just have an issue with that, you know? So, bit of a giveaway here. Anyway, a violation of individual identity, enforced intellectual conformity. How does diversity lead to enforced intellectual conformity? How exactly do we arrive from A to what I guess is C here? That's a, okay. Political quotas, an attack on merit and a form of soft bigotry. What they're referring to here is affirmative action, and I don't really like affirmative action either, but affirmative action isn't a direct derivative of diversity. The problem is this chart is so oversimplified that they're missing out on what otherwise could be good criticisms because they wanted to keep things simple enough that your average Republican could understand it. All right. White privilege / supremacy. What they mean is European moral culpability. So this is also a little bit racist. Not all Europeans are white, and not all white people are European. So the reduction of white people to European is something typically seen in like alt-right media. By reducing the arbitrary racial designation down to like a cohesive continental, like geographically unified position in the world is generally done as a way of cementing white identity, you know? It also really undermines the fact that tons of European people weren't called white, like Italians and Slavs and Mediterranean people and Irish people and Roma people. Like, so yeah, again, this is a little bit of an odd one, I would say. Anyway, racist scapegoating, especially against economically disadvantaged Europeans. What? White privilege disproportionately targets economically disadvantaged Europeans? Isn't the accusation of white privilege and white supremacy usually directed at like the upper crust? It's mostly rich white people who vote for Republicans. That's like the demographic trend. It's rich white people. This seems like a very inept attempt at trying to redirect racism by evoking class arguments in bad faith. It is true that sometimes there is an issue with people like sort of addressing racism in ways that can be alienating to people who are economically disadvantaged. I understand that can be an issue sometimes, but this is a pretty inarticulate and bad faith way of evoking that deflection. And then finally, neo-racist, racism reborn as progressive, group stereotyping. So this is also kind of projection. Saying the term white supremacy or white privilege is group stereotyping is a misunderstanding of what stereotyping is, means, or applies to. White privilege does not mean all white people are better off than all non-white people. It means that statistically speaking, generally speaking, at least in the States, because that's what we usually refer to, if you're white, you're more likely to benefit from it than you are to be disadvantaged by it. So if you're like a black poor dude, your life probably won't be made worse by being made white, but it might be made better. And likewise, if you're a white person, your life probably will not be made easier by suddenly becoming black. So, bit of a silly one here, you know? Again, this conflation of white and European is, it's a little bit odd, you know? Chillin had liberals have trouble empathizing with the white working class / poor people in the best of days. It's just important to remember that if you're going to evoke that criticism, there was no group more antagonistic towards the working class than Republicans. So I don't accept this criticism when it comes from people like, well, people like this, because it's a little bit weird for them to deflect like claims of racism by like, oh, well, this is exclusionary to the working class when they are categorically exclusionary to the working class. Anyway, by POC folks, what they mean is non-European people. Again, I ask you, I'm genuinely trying to look for a reason. Why, besides dog whistling, do they keep using the term European instead of white? They use the term European all across this. I've never seen this before, except in alt-right YouTube channels. Because, like, European here, They've got European here, European here. They keep using European instead of white. So it's just a little strange. Again, it's not something that... yeah, it reminds me of Red Ice TV or something. Short for people of European descent. No, I know it's short for people of European descent, but European doesn't mean white, and white doesn't mean European. There's a strong overlap between those two things, but it's not exactly the same. And this just plays into a lot of white nationalist language, you know? There are tons of non-white people all across Europe. When you see Europe and white used interchangeably, how do you think that comes off to the many non-white people who live in England or France or Spain? Like, they're looking at this and it's like, ah, yes, bi-POC means non-European. But there are bi-POC people in Europe. Millions of them. So, you know, whatever. Anyway, I'll stop harping on that. Which is used for neo-racist policies and stereotypes. So the term non-white people, which is what this basically means, is used to be neo-racist against white people. I don't buy it. Racial justice. What they mean is racial favoritism. Getting more callbacks to the 1950s and 60s here. With isn't this just anti-racist as code word for anti-white? Isn't this the exact same thing? This is just anti-racist as a code word for anti-white. Racial justice means anti-racism. That's literally what it means, like, directly. But what it actually means is racial favoritism. Which races do you think they favor? Probably not the European ones. Really makes you think. Which is using anti-discrimination laws for unrelated political purposes. Such as a violation of equality before the law. This is a very, very old argument, by the way. It's a violation of equality before the law to be anti-racist. This is also the gay cake baking argument. Right here. It's a violation of equality to force people to not be bigoted. There are a lot of ways that you can interpret this, but it's a very old argument. Do you guys remember, have you ever seen the Birth of the Nation? First film to be premiered in the White House, Woodrow Wilson. How the Ku Klux Klan saved the South, etc., etc. There's the basic premise of that movie is that now that black people aren't slaves anymore, they're going to, like, take over the country and, like, rape white women and stuff, and etc., etc. That's basically the premise. And that movie's fundamental argument was this, basically, that what abolitionists meant by racial justice was actually pro-black racial favoritism, and that in reality it led to a violation of equality. And I'd love to see this defined somehow. Inclusion. Uh-oh. What they mean is restricted speech and justification for purges. Ah, yes. By being inclusive. The funny thing is, by the way, is that while James Lindsay is accusing, like, progressives of doing, like, 1984 Newspeak stuff here, he's actually the one doing it. What he's doing is he's taking all these terms that have fairly understandable, usable definitions, and he's saying that any use of these terms is essentially equivalent to anti-white racism, to anti-European bias, whatever, and towards, like, I get kind of like a sedition feeling from this. Like, he would call you un-American for using the term, like, equity or something. It's just interesting because he's the one who's actually engaging in the erasure of language here. But anyway, what they mean is restricted speech and justification for purges, which is making people feel welcomed by banning anything they find offensive. Sure, people have been doing this for millennia. Yeah. That's why they did segregation. That's why companies don't allow, like, people to run in and shit on the floor. Yeah, this is why anyone does anything. This is also known as etiquette. This is also known as we live in a society. This is everything. This is anything and everything. Yes. Making people feel welcome by banning anything they find offensive. I didn't realize that When people asked for the people to not show up naked to their friends' weddings, it was a justification for purges. The silly thing here is that what they're basically doing here is they're attacking the concept of civility by describing it as something that's only done by like the far left, which is just ridiculous. And then an attack on freedoms of association and speech. Now here's a little quiz. Do you see a hypocrisy between these two arguments?
Boss bad, boss bad, boss bad.
I'll just tell you. So, in point 1, he's essentially saying that it is a violation of people's free speech and an attack on their freedom of association to ban things they find offensive for the sake of inclusion. But he is actually the one attacking people's freedoms of association and speech, because the desire to keep a space safe of certain types of offensive behavior is itself freedom of association and speech. The only time there are exceptions to this is when the freedom of association starts to hinge on the rejection of people based on their protected classes. So you can't, for example, ban a person from a space for their race. A lot of people forget this, by the way, but protected classes in the US, they aren't just like protecting minorities, they protect the majority as well. Here are things that you can't be fired for legally. You can't be fired for being straight. You can't be fired for being cisgender. You can't be fired for being American. You can't be fired for being white. You can't be fired for being these are all they protect the majority as well. It's the point I'm trying to make. So the thing is, all of these fit under freedom of association, which James is attacking here. And I'm attributing a lot of this to James Lindsay because he's just the person I'm most familiar with here. So that's, I guess, who I'm referring to. I feel like I'm doing this so civilly. Is everyone following along? I'm trying to do this like very methodically because this is like a pretense at academic, at academic like shorthand, and it's pathetic. Like this is really, really stupid. So I'm trying to like calmly, break down all the misunderstandings and lies and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, we're almost done. We're very almost done, actually. Yeah, this feels like me trying to academically debunk like a crayon scrawl from a toddler, you know? Cultural competence. I'm going to admit to some ignorance here. I'm not that familiar with the use of this term. I don't think I've ever heard anyone speak it out loud. Did this start being used more often since 2016? I don't remember this being used in my classes. Let me see. Cultural competence. Loosely defined as the ability to understand, appreciate, and interact with people from cultures or belief systems different from one's own. Oh, like being able to talk to an Italian person without making fun of the way they use their hands? Or being able to talk with an Irishman without asking him to stop beating his wife? Yeah, okay. Cultural competence. Okay. Yeah, basically social skills across cultural lines. Yeah, this seems to me like this is a woke term for being a basic human, you know? But okay. What they mean is cultural stereotyping. I don't think that's what that means. Wouldn't that mean the opposite? Wouldn't part of being able to interact with people from different cultures mean not stereotyping them? Yeah, I think this might be the opposite. Again, I just read up on it, but unless the academic definition of cultural competence is the opposite of the definition that was just on the Wikipedia article, then this is indeed the opposite. Anyway, which is indoctrination in critical race theory, neo-racist. What? An ineffective method with no basis in scientific evidence? Wait, hold on. Wait. What is this even? What? Cultural competence. This is from a academic. Hold on. Okay. 4 cognitive components. Awareness. So awareness is consciousness of one's personal reactions to people who are different. A police officer who recognizes that he profiles people who look like they're from Mexico has cultural awareness of his reaction. Okay, so like introspection, basically. Isn't that the opposite of stereotyping? Wait, that's literally the opposite of stereotyping. It says what they mean is cultural stereotyping, but it's the opposite. You're doing the opposite of that. Attitude. Increases awareness, cultural bias, beliefs in general, and training that has participants carefully examine their own beliefs and values about cultural differences. Yeah, like introspection. Okay. Knowledge. Skill. Yeah, wait, hold on. Okay, so this is just completely inaccurate. This is actually really, really nice for me because I'm glad that James Lindsay also had no idea what that term meant when he started typing about it, you know? So we all came into this ignorant. I was just the one who used my keyboard to Google its definition, and he's the one who used it to type up its definition without knowing it. Okay, and then the last one. No, wait, that's it. Oh no, environmental justice. There we go. Do you think this is just ignorance or malice? Oh, to be perfectly clear, I think James Lindsay is insane. I can't speak to the other two guys, but I do. I think that this is malice. I've seen the way that he acts on Twitter. This guy acts with absurd bad faith. He really does talk about like wokeness, like there's some kind of criminal cult that's trying to take over the world. It's either maliciousness or he's actually like not well, you know? I do genuinely believe that. And here's the thing, by the way. Okay? This was put forward under the pretense of academic legitimacy. If you put all of this forward out of ignorance, I also think that's malicious. If you're like, yeah, we're going to construct an academic debunk of all these woke terms, but you're wrong on all of them and like kind of racist with a lot of the presumptions you make, I'm going to assume malice. It is easier, it is easier to do all of this maliciously with bad faith or with bad intent than it is to do it accidentally, you know? It said it was made by the Oregon Association of Scholars. Oregon, is that legit? Hold on. Oregon Association of Scholars. I haven't heard of them before. Let me see. They have a Twitter account with 174 followers. Advancing excellence, freedom, and intellectual pluralism. In K through 12 / higher education and public debate in Oregon. Here's a link to the Responding to Social Justice Rhetoric cheat sheet. That's the thing we're looking at right now. We need immigrants like the Iranian parents quoted here to save America from its anti-American, mostly white elites. Okay, this is not an academic organization at all. They made a Twitter account and a website in order to give a veneer of academic legitimacy to crockpot conspiracism. Bruce Gilley released a paper named The Case for Colonialism. Ah, no wonder they think decolonization means being anti-white or whatever. That's an interesting one. I'm guessing that's illegal. None of this is illegal. No. What else do we have here? As conservatives, we should welcome and celebrate the immigrants who come to America legally without skipping the lines. So, we have established this is a partisan organization. No kidding around that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many scholars are a part of it. I don't think that having scholars, like, present their ideas necessarily makes an idea better. It would be about, like, there being a pre-existing academic organization that could attest the legitimacy of that org in some way. You know? Because anyone can make an organization called something like that. Here's their website. Little bare bones. And on the front page is the thing that we're looking at right now. That is nice. New censorship in American higher education. I want to see who's on the about. A nonprofit org incorporated in the state of Oregon. It is composed of professors, graduate students, college administrators and trustees, and independent scholars committed to protecting and advancing the integrity of a higher education in the state. It is the state chapter of the National Association of Scholars, a national organization of 2,800 members. Interesting. So is the National Association also very overtly politically oriented? Is this Here's the front page of the National Scholar Org. Tracking cancel culture in higher education. Here's a law on banning the passage of critical race theory. And yeah, okay. The search for white supremacists on the moon. How the Democrats' new moral panic could backfire. Biden administration views schools as racist for colorblind school discipline. Is there anything academic here, or is this just another, like, political nonprofit that calls itself academic? Members. If you click on members, the first thing that pops up is an invite for you to renew your membership. So wait, do you become a member just by paying? Lifetime membership has a one-time fee of $750. Academic members are faculty, administrators, and independent scholars. Public members are individuals outside higher education. Wait, hold on. So academic members are faculty, administrators, and independent scholars. Public members just have to pay the money. So when earlier they said that there were 2,800 members for this organization, yep, that's what I thought. 2,800 members, not academic members. They're not repping how many people are part of the organization. They're repping how many people subscribe to them. Okay. All right. We've put all the pieces together, okay? This organization means literally nothing. This means absolutely nothing. Oh, it all comes down to grifts, doesn't it? It always comes down to grifts. Anyway, we have, how many members do you have? Yeah, I've got over 350,000 members. Really makes you wonder. Join the, the Trans-Pacific YouTube Scholarly Partnership. Over 1/3 subscribers strong. God. Anyway, we have the last one here. Environmental justice, which means environmental issues are race issues. I'm pretty sure I've seen environmental justice evoked in non-racial contexts a few thousand times before. Okay. Which is using environmental protection for unrelated political purposes. Actually, the funny thing is, this is actually a deflection. This is the opposite of what is happening. In reality, people will push for environmental justice, and then people like James Lindsay will push against it by claiming that it's actually like some woke racial thing. See? It's the opposite. The racial association isn't something we use to push through unrelated policies. It's something they use to dismiss environmental policy without fundamentally addressing its premises. This is so staggeringly detached from reality. Yeah. Hey, James Lindsay. I'm talking with Tim Pool on critical race theory soon. I'd love it if I could see you there. This is really bad, man. I don't just mean like it's simplified. It's just incorrect. And it's incredible to me that, like, this is the most effort I've ever seen put into an argument like this, and it still doesn't define critical race theory. Not only it doesn't just not define it correctly, it doesn't, like, define it at all, really. Race-centered thinking? Okay. I bet you probably would say that there's no difference between critical race theory and, like, neo-Nazi eugenicist theory. You probably would say that. So maybe, actually, this is your definition. It really is just that reductive. But anyway, this is really bad stuff. And the thing that I find particularly pathetic is that you would try to legitimize this document by posting it under the heading of a fake scholarly association that boasts a high number of representatives by combining its unnamed academic contributors with people who pay $750 to the nonprofit to support its political partisanship. That's pretty pathetic, man. If I had a bad idea, I wouldn't waste time trying to get it stamped by a legitimate-sounding organization to get it passed through, but Bosch, he's been pushing white genocide on Twitter. Yeah, he's pretty far right. I know. Yeah, I know. Yes, he does that.